Understanding the different blend modes in Substance Designer has become quite difficult and confusing. Many members of the community have asked me how does this work, so today I will show you how I use these modes and what is going behind of them. Now let's get started. So to start to understand these blend modes, we first need to understand the basics of Substance Designer. In case you have missed this in one of our latest tutorials, let me show you. Substance Designer works with grayscale information, and we can read right here. So everything that is black is basically a 0, and what is white, it's a 1. Now, if you want something better to understand this, I'm gonna create a gradient linear 1 and a gradient node, yeah? So this way you're gonna be able to see it better. So if I go here and double click on this, you're gonna see that all my values here on color are 0. But if I go to white, you're gonna see that all my values here are white. Yes, basically I am working with grayscale information. That means whatever it is between 0 and 1. Yes, and all of those values are affecting this. Now, Substance Designer is, again, built up math, so most of these blend modes are math itself. So we have copy, add, subtract, multiply, add sub, and max. The biggest problem is knowing when to add some of them. So we're gonna go over all of them so you can really understand them for sure this time. So the first one is the copy. So basically, this is actually quite straightforward. We are going to copy the information from our foreground on top of our background. And usually we use masks, yes, to make this, yes, and try to make it a little more specific, but let me show you something really important about this and the way I use it. So in here we have a gray, yes, a gray square that we built with the information before, and here we have a noise. So I'm using this node, yes, with a copy amount of 0.04, and I'm using it to overlay the information. So this way, with this copy, I can add details on top of the shape, yes, but of course I need to use a mask. If I don't use a mask, what's gonna happen is that this noise is gonna be everywhere, yeah. So you need to be careful with that, but you can see how this is actually working, yeah. So it's not just blending the information, it's putting one information on top of the other, and the less intensity we have, the more smooth this looks, yeah. And of course, these lines, just you know, are basically the square that we have, yeah, so you shouldn't worry about that. Blend mode number 2, it's add linear dodge. This is a mode really simple. We are just adding two numbers, two values, one on top of the other. So the best way of actually showing you that this is how it works is by using a shape which has no information. This is black information, this is 0, and to this shape adding a circle. Yes, that's as much as you can go. And if I start to lower this down, you're gonna see that it's less and less information until we get to 0. Yes, so this is just basic math, as we just mentioned. Yes, so to get it a little more straight into it, yes, the information from our foreground is gonna be added to our background. That's the way you do it. It's just like doing 2 plus 2 is gonna be equal 4. The only thing is that in here we can't use 2 plus 2. We only can use numbers between 0 and 1. Yeah. Now, how do I use this in my daily work? So this great example is something you've seen in my latest tutorials. Now, this is a pattern I created, yes, by using several nodes. I wanted to make something a little bit more new and original, and also practicing for new material and trying to build for you guys. So let's see how this works. So you know that when I do a pattern, I don't do everything in one step. I split this into smaller steps. And the first step where we are going to use the add mode, it's going to be at the beginning, where we're going to be doing the actual shape. So I did a shape node with a small rectangle here, and I wanted to achieve this shape here, yes, which is kind of half a rectangle, and then you have the edges that are kind of rounded. Now, I could have gone from here, from this shape, to an architect, yes, get this lower, then do something like this maybe. But as you can see, it's not as useful because then I need to do another mask, yeah, and it's really not working that well. This way, by using a little bit of code, I can make this actually quite procedural. So let's see, I created a shape, yes, a rectangle and a small circle. Then what I did is the following. I created a blend node, just set it at add, yeah, and from this I created a transform that is not going to tile. Now that this is no tiling, what I can do is I can blend these two together, yes. Now the problem with this is that, of course, I can't see my circle. It's in the middle and we are adding white with white, being 1 with 1, which is just going to give us the same result that is top information. So I'm going to lower this a little bit, yes, and then I'm going to start pulling this up. So now I can see where I'm putting my shape. Once I do that, I want to match this small circle with the end of my rectangle. So I'm gonna do that. Yes, as much as I can. Not sure why I can't. I managed to do it before. Now I can't. Oh well, yeah. That's actually gonna make it, because it's actually in the middle. So once you have this, you just turn the add back to 1. You go back and you generate a mirror grayscale with an axis in Y. Now there's some extra steps here, but I think that maybe you're going to be interested in this. I made this in a really specific way, and I would like to see how you would do it. I used the curve node, but there's other ways of doing it. If you're really interested in learning how to use the curve node, you can just leave it a message in the comments and let me know if you want to know different techniques for this amazing node. Now let's go to blend mode number 3. This is blend mode number 3, and it's multiply. Of course, again, this is basic max, so let's just remember a little bit of it. So we're multiplying numbers in here. That means that if we do 2 by 2, it's going to give us 4, and if we do 2 by 0, it's going to give us 0. So this is actually a really great way of doing masks. Yes, that's why I use multiply for most of my times. I use it for masking. So in here you have a really great example. So you have a shape node of a pyramid, yes, that have these really sharp edges, but I wanted to give it a more circular shape. So I created a shape node with a disk, and I multiplied the information. As you can see, it cut my shape from this to this. Yeah, this is the most easiest way. Just to tell you, you can again change the multiplied information, and of course you can use it in really different ways. This is one of the most specific ways I use it. So in this case, I'm using a tile generator to create a brick pattern. Then I'm using a flat fill to generate a flat fill to random grayscale. From that, I'm going to be using this information to multiply it by our brick pattern. This is actually quite useful to generate height variation. Yes, so I'm really generate different types of height variation that you can see here in my 3D viewport. So I'm gonna pull this up. Yeah, I'm gonna come here from the side, and you can see that now just by changing this, I'm gonna change the height of all my bricks. Yes, now why is it happening? Because we are multiplying 1, yes, that is completely white in our bricks here, yes, by these values that we have in our random grayscale. That's how we actually are adding information, and the same happens when we're doing flat fill, yes, to gradient. And we do angle variation, and we input this here, where bricks are gonna have different angles. And again, we're using exactly the same mode, the multiply, yes. So take this mode in mind in order to generate variations in masks, height difference, but most importantly in mask as well. Now this is blend mode number 4, but I did miss one blend mode on purpose, and this blend mode is subtract, and there's a reason for that. So I'm gonna go back to add so you can see it here. I'm just gonna give you an example. Just by logic, if we have a blend mode that adds information to our map, we can also have a blend mode that it's going to allow us to subtract information, and that's basically the subtract. And I am saying this because this is actually quite vital information for our next blend mode, the fourth blend mode, the add sub. The add sub adds information and subtracts information at the same time, and it does it in a really weird way. So this blend mode does something really interesting. So you can see here, yes, that I created a tile generator with a lot of squares, and here I just white information. And we are using add sub, and the result is actually quite weird. Why is it? What add sub mode does, yes, it reads every single shape in your image, and it tries to identify if it's below or on top 0.5 value of grayscale information. If your information is below 0.5, it's gonna subtract that information from your background. If your information is on top of 0.5, it's gonna add it to your background. So basically it's a really great way, yes, of doing both things at the same time. So basically I'm adding and subtracting information here, yes, and we can really see an example here. So let me check here. So here we have a gray, and here we have almost white. What's happening? We're adding the information, yes. In here we have almost dark. In here we had exactly the same value. What happens? We have pitch black because we are subtracting the same number by the same number. Yeah, so that's what it's actually doing. Now I haven't used this mode too much, so you have to be honest with you, but I did find some ways of using it that's gonna help you maybe to make some interesting brick patterns. So in this case, I'm trying to build this brick wall where Most of my edges are really close one to each other, but we have kind of this like bevel and space in between, like really handmade shape. So I generated a tile generator and I invert this with an edge width of 1.55 and an edge roundness of 0, and invert the information. Then I bevel this by 0.05 and I use an add sub, and this is the result. Yes, I'm basically kind of like sculpting and beveling my shapes my bricks at the same time. I'm generating this really nice area, and this might be the spark for new ideas for you to actually make something new. If we are talking about math and substance designer, then for sure we need to mention our maximum and minimum value. Yes, and this is our 5th and 6th blending mode, the max and lighten and the min darken. Yes, 2 blend modes that work exactly the same but in different directions. So just to put it really simple, the max blend mode, what it's going to do is going to pick the highest point of your background image based on information of your foreground image, while the min is going to take your lowest point from the information between your foreground and your background image. Yes, so that's how it actually generates these kind of things. So as you can see here, yes, I have this output color of 0.52 value and this shape, yeah. And if I use a multiply here, I'm gonna get this shape. Now, if I use this on top of this grayscale, you're gonna see that the min darken is taking the lowest point. So we're going from this to this. Yes, it's really useful to kind of like, let's say it in a more simple way, soften certain areas. But let me get you a really better example. So in here, yes, we have dirt 2 and dirt 1. Usually when I want to generate new noises, what I do is I use the max. Why? Because it allows me to blend 2 different branches or information without having them overlapping. If I do this with the add, yes, what it's gonna have is that I'm gonna have these really strong white areas. But if I do it with max, I'm not gonna have it. I'm just gonna get the highest point and that's it. The rest is just gonna be really good. So I have some really white areas, but they're not as strong as I would like. Now, what should I do with this later? Well, in my case, I use the min darken. And again, I'm using this to kind of like soften things, and you can see the result here. Yes, if we go in the normal mode, if we go here is the max result, and this is the min result. And you can see how it's actually kind of soften everything. And I can keep pulling this down. The more I pull this down, the more information I'm gonna start to soften. The more I pull this tab, the less information we're gonna be kind of like pulling down. Yeah, so we are always remember with the max, we are trying to take the max value of everything we are combining, while the min one is just taking the minimum value between the both images that we are inputting to the node. Now, coming near our end, this is one of our last 2 blending modes, and it's divide. Again, as we said before, this is all based on math, and we all know what happens when you divide 0 by 1. Yes, we are basically dividing the information from our background for our foreground. So how many times do we need to multiply white information with another number to get black information? It's 0. 0 by 1 gives us 0. That's why the result is 0. It's black. And that's why if I keep pulling this tab, what we're gonna get as a result in the blend mode is gonna be exactly the same information as our background, because we are dividing by 1. Now, when we start to pull this down, the result gets higher because we need more numbers or more value to get to match this result here between these 2. Yeah, so that's actually quite straightforward, but the next one is gonna be a little bit more useful for you. This is the screen and overlay, and I put these 2 together because if you have to ask me, I always use them on the same way, but it's really gonna depend on how or what. So overlay, as you can see, is a little bit stronger, while screen is a little bit more softer. The explanation on this is actually quite complex, and I really don't want to fill your head with a lot of complex maps. So let's set this as screen and overlay. Do brighten your maps. So it takes the information from your background and uses the information on your foreground and brightens that information up. It's kind of blending them in between both values, and you can see it here. See? So it's kind of reading, if you have the same amount of information, the same color, most probably there's not gonna be a change, but if you have more or less, it's gonna generate a huge change, as you can see here. And same happens with the overlay. Now, there might seem like there's no example here, but let me show you one really quick on how I use it in my base color. So I'm using the pattern from one of the blending modes we did, yes, and what I did is I changed the color to red. Yeah, And now from the normal map, I get a curvature smooth and a curvature node and blend them by 50% in this case should have been, yeah. And then turning this information into color information, and I'm inputting into my foreground of a blend node using the screen. As you can see, it's highlighting my shape. Yes, it's actually quite useful because it gives more, like it highlights mostly edges. In this case, it might be a little bit too strong, but you can really use this information to kind of highlight edges and other areas of your material in a really good way. Let's say I have something like this. Of course, it's not gonna be as exact and professional, but it might be useful for you for any other moment. So see how it's kind of highlighting everything. If we go from here to here, you're gonna see an actual result of this, and we can lower this to generate this kind of results really here that are actually helping us a lot. Now, all of these blending modes have different ways of working, yes. And in color, they kind of work in the same way, but you might need to explore these different ways on how they do, and you may find really useful ways of using them for your advantage. Now you know the different ways of using these blending modes, so let me give you a challenge. There are some blend modes I didn't mention. If you can guess which one it is and how it works, tell us at the comments of this video, and in our next chapter we will take a look into it. Now thanks for watching and see you in the next chapter.